there are multiple approaches, and let me start from the beginning with something totally non-AI, which is the problem that we today have a society where unfortunately a lot of people do not attach much value to privacy. Right. For example, in Germany, we had this discussion about COVID applications. There was a very small group, but very loud, who was extremely protective of privacy. They won. We've got a most privacy protecting application. When the application was released in the App Store, #1 download, top downloads was WhatsApp, and #2 download was the privacy protecting COVID app. And that says everything, right? The valuation of privacy is, it's not in people's minds. And if you look at the authors of the big 3 dystopian books of the last century, right? Like 1984, Clockwork Orange, and Brave New World, everything, like almost everything that these authors imagined would go wrong, we have implemented. Only that the thing that they couldn't imagine that it would happen without dictatorship, right? And we didn't need dictators to implement all this to ourselves. All we got was comfort. So the exchange we made, exchanging a lot of freedom and exchanging a lot of privacy for a bit of comfort, that is something that has to go into the mind of society, because otherwise we're just having a philosophical discussion here that no one cares about them because they download the next thing that collects their data and works on it. It's great to see that a lot of companies actually hop onto the bus and say, like, no, this has gone too far. We need ethical thinking in our projects, and especially into AI. And let me explain why this is important in AI, right? It's AI is not the big super intelligence that you hear on the talk show. It's not what we have to be afraid of. It's not the thing that will determine that humans are bad for the planet and kill us all. AI is because it works on data and knowledge that comes from people, it is basically a multiplication of us. And if we give bullshit data to the AI, and if we teach it bullshit knowledge, and if we have the AI learn from people who behave contrarian to our behavior in society, then we will have very bad AI. And why is this bad? It's because AI multiplies, right? If I am a linear person, if I put my knowledge to work, I have a linear effect. I can have my time and that's it. At some point I'll die and I'll have some effect. If I give my experience to an AI and I have the AI act, that's what the big potential is, right? I can multiply my experience and it can be used thousands, millions of times per second to actually do something. This is why AI holds such big business potential, because it can automate literally everything at not the need of standardization, but just the need of having the necessary experience. Multiplying that means going from, normally this would have taken me a month, you can take it down to a second, right? That's what's happening with AI. The problem is if this is happening at a bad level, not at a business success level and so on, if this is happening at a level where people are trying to do malicious things, where before it was very expensive to spy on everyone, now I can, having the knowledge of spycraft, I can now spy on everyone because the AI can do it. That is a multiplication of bad effort. And I think that there's two things that we need to know. A, we need guidelines of what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. B, we need to be at the forefront in the world that values privacy and other human rights of AI, so that we can tell anyone who's trying to do like the bad things on purpose to say, like, don't even try because we're so far ahead of you. And I think this gets lost a lot of times in the discussions that are out there. We don't just want to be ahead in AI because it's commercially viable. We want to be ahead in AI because eventually someone is going to do something not very nice with it, because it multiplies experience. Experience can be used to do good things and bad things. So if we find someone who's trying to do bad things, we need to be able to actually act against it. And I think this is one of the main efforts that needs to be made. I think it is very difficult to pre-regulate AI. So I know that there's ethics commissions, for example, in Germany that make stands of what algorithms should, like what type of test algorithms should be performed. Guys, we don't even have enough AI expert yet. So the people who could validate this are the top of the experts who could validate the other expert. That's completely unrealistic. The question is, what guidelines do we need for results, right? The results, that's what we regulate. We don't regulate how an algorithm works. Like there's no one in the administration, and the administration doesn't pay well enough to hire these people. There's no one in the administration internationally who will look out for this. It is companies that have to have a self-interest to actually get this done. And I think GDPR is a very good example. It gave companies a self-interest because of the fines, because of the ability not to sell in the market. All of a sudden, people care for this. And I think that what we underestimate in Europe is that because there is GDPR, not every company has to come up with their own compliance rules for privacy. In other countries, every company has to have their own rules for compliance and privacy, and then it has to be verified every time they create a new contract. This is a huge disadvantage for other locations. And yes, GDPR is not perfect by far, right? It sucks that we have to click in the internet, surfing the internet all the time and so on, but it's a great starting point, and we're not using it as a commercial advantage yet, and I hope that we'll be doing so. To me, privacy is one of the most important things. The question, and I've already had a bit of chat here in the Q&A with Zoe, that's why I took my camera offline, because you didn't always see my bald head, right? But can there be too much privacy? Yes, sure there can. I mean, if privacy starts to interfere with other fundamental human rights, like liberty or the right to health, and these type of things, then there has to be a consideration, and the consideration is a legal procedure. Like what gets ahead, and all these things are in place. The problem is that what is not in place is the ability to multiply this. And this is, I think, why it is really important that companies step up. Microsoft is actually a very good example. I know Steve can say this publicly, but I'll say it for him, is doing much better than other tech giants, because Microsoft has approached it from an external view, basically, rather than trying to say like, okay, these are our commercial goals. How do we make privacy fit? The privacy office at Microsoft actually looks like, this is what our values are, and this is what we value. How do we make our projects and products fit? And here comes the next thing. Currently, people trust big tech companies, or generally business, more than government. I think this should be a fantastic motivation for government to step up and finally get their act together. Government is way too slow. We see in the corona crisis that decisions are made post-mortem, right? All the decisions are being made in government are after the knowledge is, like, everybody knows. Currently, we're discussing test strategies for COVID. Like, test strategies are freaking out the window since we understand how mutations work. We know that there's no way you can test everybody every day and be safe, right? That just doesn't work. It's the same thing as vaccination, right? We know there are mutations. So how do we deal with this? And governments are behind. A lot of large companies are ahead of this. They have much better concepts. And this is why people trust companies more. I don't think that's a good idea, because companies tend to be not legitimate, right? Unless everybody becomes a shareholder or legitimized. I think that this should not be a reason to punish the companies who stepped up when other people didn't make a decision. It should be a way for government to actually step up and get these fundamental things, human rights, privacy as part of human rights, but also the question of what is free speech and what isn't free speech and so on, get that done with. Like, that's where it has to go. Because in a world, and to get me back to artificial intelligence, where we have artificial intelligence, it is absolute key that we have this well-defined. At OISTE, right, we have a technology where we can have end-to-end security for data. So we know where the data comes from. We know why it's trustworthy. We can make much better decisions on it because we don't need that much data to actually have sound statistics. But it has to be clear, is that actually legal, that this company acts in such a way so we can say the AI should do this or the AI shouldn't do that. Otherwise, we'll just optimize for economic profit. And I don't think that's all we want, because that could be short-term. We need to be long-term. Thank you.